Here's an interesting old record player that I'm already in the process of taking apart. This is a 1946 Belmont 78 RPM record player. I first saw this record player in a Sam's Photo Fact from about 1989 or 90, somewhere around there, and I always liked it. Well, it took me until 2014 to find one, but here we are. The case is kind of dinged up and soiled, so I'll have to clean it the best I can. But I really like this tone arm. This is a plastic tone arm, and it's designed to sort of cradle in this rest position here. At one time there was a piece of foam or something here in the lid to hold the tone arm down while the unit was being transported, but that's obviously deteriorated, so I'll have to replace that with something. And unlike this control panel, we have a motor off-on switch as well as a master power and volume control. This motor switch makes it convenient for stopping the turntable to change the record. Alright, let's plug it up and see what happens. Okay, the amplifier is alive. With it turned down, I can hear a slight bit of filter hum, which is really not too bad for something that's almost 70 years old. However, the cartridge has a little bit of output, but not much. Actually, that's more hum pickup than anything else. However, if I touch the positive lead of the cartridge, I get a signal through the amp, so that tells me the amplifier is working pretty good. The motor is completely dead. As you can tell, there's no platter rotation. Actually, I can hear the motor running now, but the platter is not rotating. Alright, enough chit-chat. Let's pull it apart and fix it. Okay, here's the underside of the unit showing the amplifier. This uses a 3-tube amp, which is nice. I don't have to worry about finding a high output 3-volt cartridge like I would if this was a 1-tube amp. Have about a 6-inch speaker attached to the front. There's our turntable motor. It's obviously very dirty, and that whole mechanism will need to be taken apart and cleaned. But first we'll do what needs to be done to the amplifier. Here's the underside of the amp. I only see 3 paper capacitors that need to go. And we have a sand resistor. That's our filament dropping resistor. It's obviously still good, but I can tell that it's starting to corrode. So I'll probably replace that with a modern resistor. Okay, we now have the 3 paper capacitors replaced. This is the cap of death that connects between the chassis and circuit ground. This is the plate bypass capacitor for the output tube, aka tone capacitor. And this is our coupling capacitor that couples the driver stage to the output stage. And here's our 0.05 microfarad cap of death leaking. Our 0.02 tone capacitor. Seems okay at the lowest voltage. Not leaking bad, but leaking a little bit. And finally, our coupling capacitor, a solar seal-tight 0.01 microfarad. Now, out of what was available during the 30s and 40s, these solar seal-tight capacitors were probably the best. Yes, I found them to be leaky, but they usually leak a lot less than everything else that I find in today's world. In fact, on the capacitance meter, we have a nice sharp eye opening. You see, this capacitor is not even, the light's not even blinking, so this capacitor could have probably been left alone. Even at 600 volts, it's not flashing. So, yeah, this solar seal-tight capacitor held up really well. And it actually measures right at 0.01 microfarad. So that's very impressive. And here it is on the modern digital meter. 0.011 microfarad. Can't get much better than that. Okay, now that that's done, we'll move on to the electrolytic capacitor replacement. Okay, the amp is working, and I just replaced this original heavy dead crystal pickup cartridge with a Fan Steel P51-3. Yep, turn the volume up. Now you can hear we're passing a signal. Okay, here's our Fan Steel P51-3 cartridge. I like to use these in 78 RPM record players. And by the way, this same cartridge is also available with a 2mm all-speed stylus, which I really wouldn't recommend for LP use, but anyway. And there's also a version with a 0.7mm stereo microgroove stylus. And since this tone arm is made out of plastic, it doesn't track as heavy as some of the old metal tone arms. So, now all we have to do is get the platter to spin, which will involve taking the mechanism apart and cleaning it and re-lubricating it. And at that point, it should be ready to play records again. Here's a sticker on the underside of the platter. Ballantine Phono Drive, Russell Electric Company, Chicago, Illinois. And I see a number 116 stamped into the platter. Probably a date code for November 1946. That's when the cartridge was made, according to the date on it. And here's our drive mechanism. You can see it's very cruddy, and it looks like the rubber mounting grommets need to be replaced. So it's really just self-explanatory. Just take everything apart, clean it, and lubricate it. Pay attention to where everything goes as you're taking it apart, so you can put it back together again, and then it should be good to go. In order to simplify servicing, since this drive is going to need such extensive work, I just went ahead and removed the whole mechanism from the motor board. First thing I'll do is remove the motor, and that's accomplished by removing these 3 bolts here, you can see. And next we have to remove this idler wheel in order for the motor assembly to come out, and that's accomplished by removing this E-clip right here. You want to be careful when you're removing any of these clips. You don't want them to fly across the room, never to be seen again. Obviously, since this is a single speed mechanism, there's not as many parts to deal with. So now we want to remove these rubber grommets. They just snap out, and then we can remove these clips to disassemble this little section here, and be careful not to lose the spring. Clean everything up real good, and then once that's done, we'll re-lubricate and take our motor apart, clean it up, and then re-lubricate that. Well, this is a first. I have the motor removed, and as you can see, the motor is riveted together, so I can't easily take this apart and clean it. So I'll have to clean it from the outside as best I can and use the zoom spout oil to apply oil to the bearings the best way I can from this position. Yeah, like I said, this is a first for me. Every one of these motors that I've worked on, they're easy to take apart, but not this one. Okay, we have the mechanism all cleaned up, re-lubricated, and put back together. We replaced the rubber motor mounting grommets. It now seems to run, except for one problem. As you can see, the idler wheel has a notch in it, and that's a result of this record player sitting idle for 50 or 60 years. and the wheel resting up against the motor shaft is what caused that notch to appear. The result of that notch is, well, I just smoked something. Yeah, it's not a good idea to let our leads touch. As I was saying, the notch is what's causing that noise you hear. And the only way around that is to have the idler wheel rebuilt, which I will probably do someday. Or you can remove the rubber tire, flip it inside out, and no more bump, bump, bump sound. Now this old rubber is starting to get a little bit on the deformed side, so it will still need to be rebuilt, but that's a quick fix for now. And there we go, spinning like a top. Okay, one problem I noticed is the idler wheel was wanting to jump out from under the platter while it was rotating, so I had to add these washers here to bring it up a little bit so it wouldn't jump out from under the platter while it was turning. So now I think we're ready to put this back in the case and hopefully play some records. Well, here we are. Obviously I haven't put it completely back together yet, but I'm playing an RCA Victor 12-inch vinyl pressing Red Seal classical record. And you can hear it has a decent sound. Let's go up and find a standard 10-inch shellac record and see how it sounds. Try to find something from the period this record player was made. Okay, it's basically fixed. I still want to replace the power cord with a newer one. This one is starting to age a little bit, and I want to replace that 75 ohm sand resistor with something a little more reliable, since that one's starting to corrode. And I'll need to glue a piece of foam rubber or something here. That's what holds the tone arm in place while you're carrying the record player. Otherwise we might damage the stylus or the cartridge. And of course I need to clean the cabinet up, and the idler wheel will eventually have to be rebuilt, but I won't bore you with all of those details. You saw the main thing that needs to be seen. Right now, here's a fitting song for this. It's called the Turntable Song by the Andrews Sisters. Now, I only play a little bit of it because of the copyright Nazis.
Round and round and round and round the turntable goes, and on comes the tune that you feel in your toes. On and on and on.
Okay, not bad. Well, that's about all I've got for this one right now. So with that said, thanks for watching, and more to come later. Okay, there is one other thought I want to leave you with concerning the idler wheels in these older record players. Most of the record players from the 78 RPM era, and even some from the LP and 45 era, do not have a neutral position on the speed selector for those models that have a speed selector, and they don't have any type of mechanism to retract the idler wheel from the motor shaft when the machine is turned off. So that's what causes idler wheel damage when these things sit up for a long time. So after you restore such a machine that does not have a neutral position or some other way to retract the idler wheel from the motor shaft when not in use, it's a good idea to let the machine run for, say 30 minutes or so once a week. You know, you don't have to play a record if you don't want to. Just turn the thing on and let it run for a half hour or so on a weekly basis, and that should keep your idler wheel from developing a notch or a flat spot that will cause the bump, bump, bump noise that we were hearing earlier. Okay. I think that'll about do it this time, and I'll leave you with this.